So now something very kind of practical in you weather junkies out there, and you're probably already familiar with this idea of air masses and weather fronts, but let's take a look. So an air mass is actually just a chunk of air with similar characteristics. It's like it has its own little entity. And a chunk of air, how big is it? Well, it can be the size of a large state. And what does it have in common throughout the air mass? Well, I would say at least in horizontal layers, it has the same, most notably, temperature and moisture content. Well, how do air masses form? Well, a chunk of air sits over what we call a source region for a couple weeks or so, a period of time, and it picks up characteristics of that source region. I'm going to show you source regions here in a minute. But the source region will be either hot or cold, and the source region will either be dry or moist. And so it's kind of like if you go visit someplace for a month, you kind of pick up the accent of that location. Then that's kind of the way air masses form, by picking up the characteristics or accent of their source region. So once they dwell over their source region, then they go on the move and kind of take that accent or that moisture or temperature with them. So then we have these five main air mass types, again based upon moisture and temperature. And I'm going to show you these different source regions for getting Now these are the pieces that go together to make these different. These aren't the source regions themselves, but a source region could be dry or moist. If it's dry, we use the letter C for continental. If it's moist, we use the letter M for maritime. It could either be hot or cold, capital T for hot, tropical, capital P for cold, polar. It could be very cold, we use the capital letter A for Arctic. Okay, so those are kind of the pieces of the source regions. They aren't the source regions themselves, okay, that go to make these six different air mass types from these six different types of source regions. So here's a map of the United States, and we're going to kind of look at them one by one. So we have this actually maritime tropical. So maritime meaning moist, tropical meaning hot. And so the source regions for us would be here. They would be, and I don't know if you can kind of see, here's North America there, be kind of here and here. So large bodies of water, maritime, and hot. They're kind of closer to the equator. The next source region, and actually this only occurs in the summertime, is a continental tropical source region. And notice it's right here. Continental meaning dry, okay, and tropical meaning warm. So that's the source region for continental tropical air masses. Again, these source regions are where the chunk of air hangs out and dwells and picks up the characteristics of that source region. Then we have another air mass from another source region. So these would be maritime polar air masses. Maritime meaning moist, polar meaning cold. So moist meaning they have to be over the oceans, and polar meaning they have to be kind of northward, away from the equator. Okay, so if air dwells here in these locations and then moves towards us, okay, that actually would be maritime polar air masses from those two source regions. Continental polar then looks like this. So continental meaning dry, okay, and polar meaning cold. So we actually have a source region here in North America. So a chunk of air can sit here, become dry and cold, and then move about its way and be continental polar air mass. And the last one is bitterly cold, and that's Arctic. And sometimes, guess I do have six. I have maritime Arctic and simply Arctic. So maritime Arctic would mean that it is over water. So it's got a certain amount of moisture. Now I will tell you though that, and you already know, that the colder it is, as indicated by the Arctic temperature, it doesn't hold much water. But maritime Arctic, very cold and somewhat has water vapor in it. And then we have continental Arctic air mass. So I forgot that your textbook breaks them out as the maritime Arctic and continental Arctic. So continental Arctic meaning dry, and it would be bitterly dry because it's also Arctic. Remember, cold, the colder the air, the less water vapor it holds.